And twirly, 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 twirly. For the first time in 5 years, the Vancouver Canucks have a playoff. I'm using air quotes. Playoff victory. I don't know if we still call these playoffs or not, but whatever. But the first time since March, the Vancouver Canucks won a hockey game. So we are here to recap Game 2 of the Vancouver Canucks Minnesota Wild. Vancouver Canucks 4-3 victory over the Minnesota Wild. This is the Hockey Podcast. We are live on Facebook, and if you can also follow us on Twitter at podcast_hockey. You can also subscribe on iTunes, Google, iHeartRadio, and Spotify as well. Sean, hello, good morning to you, and how are you doing today?
Oh, Kevin, yeah, good morning. I'm doing quite well. It's been way too long since we were able to sleep on a Canucks win, so it's nice to do that for a change.
Yes, although they did make it a little bit more stressful than they needed to last night, but we will chat a little bit about that. Joining us as well is from the Sota Pod, from the Hockey Podcast Network, Isha Jahromi. Hello, how are you?
Awesome, boys. Thanks for having me back on. It's a pleasure. You said it. We got to sleep after a Canucks win. And I'm going to say in the postseason, because the points, they count for postseason. We'll just say it's the postseason. Or, I don't want to get too technical here. Yeah, it's the qualifying round. But what is the qualifying round for? The playoffs. So there you go. No, I'm great, boys. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks for coming on. And so let's get into this. Sean ranted about the reffing in Game 1. Maybe we'll start there, Sean. Just how did you feel about the reffing Game 2?
I felt it was better. I didn't feel like there's as many. Well, let's just put it this way: the inconsistencies went both ways. We had ticky-tack calls going both ways, as opposed to Game 1, where I felt it was a one-sided affair. So, at this point, I haven't been thoroughly impressed by the reffing in all the games overall. So, it's just you gotta battle through it, and the Canucks did this time, and it's much better.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard for these guys to battle through it, though, because literally, like, they're battling out there and getting called for every little thing. Now, some of it's warranted. For example, when Zach Parise, I forget I think it was Troy Stetcher, he stepped on his skate blade, or he stepped on his stick blade, got tripped up. That's a call that's going to be made, every day of the week. However, some of these plays where these guys, both from the Vancouver Canucks and the Minnesota Wild, just fighting for space to get in deep or get in tight in the slot. I mean, the rest are calling everything. And some things is just like, guys, like, let them play. I do agree to a certain extent that Game 1, the Wild were given a little bit of an edge there because, like I said, there were just some plays that I don't think the Vancouver Canucks, I don't think the refs should have called those infractions necessarily for the Canucks. But I think last night, boys, I think it was just it was a gong show out there. Like, there should not have been that many penalties dished out. I really truly believe that there's something league-wide that's mandated or that's coming from the head office that's pretty much like call everything, because we want, in my opinion anyways, it's to get the viewers exciting hockey post a potential lull after the COVID-19 pause. Is that too far of a stretch to say it's a conspiracy theory? I don't even think it is, guys, because we're seeing it in every single series. And unfortunately for the National Hockey League, the Wild and Canucks, they can't score on the power play because the Canucks went freaking 1 for 7 and the Wild 0 for 6. So they're not helping the National Hockey League's case much in this series.
The officiating has been really interesting throughout the series. It feels a little ticky-tack, but it feels, one of the things that I do think so far is other than this series, the power play. Like, if you can get your power play going, you do have an advantage getting ahead, and I think it is an advantage in the series. Like, the Flames and Jets, as an example, the Flames have scored I think it's off the top of my head, half of their goals on the power play. Their power play in Game 1 and Game 3 were dominant and did nothing in Game 2. So if you can get that power play going, that is going to be an edge. Which is fine, but it's just like, I feel like if you're north of 6-7 power plays per game, I mean, I think it's less, because you guys can agree. Last night, I don't think the Wild nor the Canucks were undisciplined at all. Like, I don't think they were undisciplined at all. I think they were just playing hard hockey. I didn't see any undisciplined penalties last night at all. Yeah, so, I mean, to go back to your point, yeah, I agree that right now, the way that the playoffs are playing out, it's very much different than in years past where it's a hard game that we don't see a lot of calls. It's the opposite. It's like your penalty kill and goalie are going to take you pretty far now, how it's constructed. But it really looks like you said, Kevin, the power play is going to carry you. And I don't know, from a Minnesota Wild perspective, if that's something they want to, throw all their chips in. And quite frankly, probably from there, and they're like, damn, like, this isn't fair. Obviously, like, Canucks came in here with the advantage being their power play and goaltending, of course. But let's be honest, they scored the second amount of power play goals in the entire National Hockey League last year behind the Edmonton Oilers. These guys can score goals. Credit to the Wild, they only held them to 1 on 7 opportunities last night. But if this is how the tournament is going to transpire, you got to imagine that teams who are, have thrived on defense and have thrived with depth, much like the Minnesota Wild, are kind of rolling their eyes in the sense that, like, yeah, we're getting the calls too, but we don't have the manpower to do it. We don't have the talent to do it, much like the Vancouver Canucks. I'm not saying they're complaining. I'm not saying even the fans are complaining. I'm just saying, from someone who's been watching the games, I have to imagine that, like, if you see this amount of discrepancy, I don't know. I'd be a little ticked if I was them playing on the ice.
I want to give the Wild a shout out in terms of how they've how they have been able to keep the Canucks power play in check. They played very super aggressive, especially on the entries. As soon as the Canucks get in the zone to try and cause a bobble of the puck and a turnover, and they've done a very good job. They did a very good job of that early on in the game, and but they can only keep up that intensity for so long.
Yeah, totally.
And later on in the game, once the Canucks got some more power plays, it looked like they couldn't keep it up, and that's when the Canucks started to look a little bit better on the power play. So that's gonna be a very key going into Game 3 is whether or not the Canucks can exploit the over aggressive Wild penalty kill, and if not, wear them down to a point where they can't be that aggressive.
Yeah, no, totally. And that aggressive style, I mean, translates to the 5-on-5 for the Wild too. There are countless of times where basically when the Canucks got set up in the zone, that's their bread and butter. I mean, it is off the cycle and off the rush. That's how they score predominantly all their goals. But you said it on the I have some notes here, even on the penalty kill, where, like, they couldn't even get past the blue line because it'd be like a 3-way trap with Ryan Suter, Jared Spurgeon, and pick your big forward there. So that really impressed me from the Wild sense. The one thing, though, the Vancouver Canucks, I got to give them props for, is they absolutely dominated the face-off dot. Like, 63% to the Wild's 37. Now, I know the Wild were 27% in the face-off dot throughout the regular season, but come on, this is the playoffs. You got to get a little dirty there and win those draws. Koivu got a little too dirty there and got that face-off infraction, which we don't see often anymore. I remember seeing those back in the day a little bit, which I don't even think they were a penalty back in the day. People just digging their feet and clawing the puck in there, doing hand passes and stuff like that. But I thought it was ironic that the last goal scored of the game was off a face-off win by the Wild with 7 seconds left. It's like, all right, boys, you couldn't have done that you couldn't have tried to get some of those chances earlier on in the game. You got to wait 7 seconds to get the puck back to Dumba to set up Fiala. But no, I think the face-off story is something that people are overlooking because the Vancouver Canucks dominate. Man, like I saw Bo Horvat fight and honestly dominate Eric Stahl in the face-off dog. This is Eric Stahl we're talking about. This guy's a beast, and this is bread and butter. So props to Canucks. Like you gotta win face-offs to get possession, especially against a team that thrives on possession. Now the Wild's underlining possession numbers, Corsi Fenwick, I could break it all down. I'm not going to. It was all just as good as game one. It led the Canucks in pretty much every facet. But again, you let a goal in 24 seconds into the game off a beautiful snipe. I'm taking nothing away from Pearson. I'm taking nothing away from Sale. It was a great shot. It wasn't necessarily a bad goal to give up, but it's something you don't want to do in the beginning of the game to set the tone. And I'm not saying that necessarily hampered the Wild's energy or anything like that, because I thought their experience showed and they bounced back. But still, that definitely put them behind the 8 ball ahead of time when you're a team that does not necessarily thrive on scoring and does not necessarily thrive on winning faceoffs for possession, especially against this young Canucks team.
Well, for me, that was one of my, I think, almost the difference between game one and game two is the Wild were able to establish their game early by getting that early goal from Kevin Fiala, where the Canucks were able to establish where they wanted to go and the game that they wanted to dictate by scoring early with Tanner Pearson. I think that was one of the key differences between game one and game two.
Yeah, it's going to be a tight goal scoring matchup this entire series, I think. Like, I know it was a 4-3 game, but it wasn't a 4-3 game till late, especially for the Wild and even for the Canucks. You know, it was 3-1, 2-1 for most of the game.
Yeah, it's going to be close. It's going to come down to who can dictate their play. And getting that first goal is going to be huge because it allows you to dictate the play. And yeah, the Wild came back and tied it up, but then the Canucks really, really found a way to control the play a little bit more in that second period and won the game in that second period.
Yeah. So first of all, let's go through the Canuck lineup changes here that were. As Travis Green put unfit to play, Adam Gaudette and Tyler Toffoli for Jake Virtanen. Much controversial Jake Virtanen and even much controversial Louis Eriksson. What did you think of both of their games last night?
Go ahead, Sean. Go ahead.
Yeah, Louis Eriksson played like Louis Eriksson and just plugged away and got the job done. Like there's nothing spectacular about it. He actually goes from the press box to leading the team in 5-on-5 ice time. But he played a solid game and did these little things. Louis Eriksson, he did all the little things right. And if you're bringing in someone like that, you've got to do that. Once you lose a top six forward, and I don't mind that. At this point, having that depth is a nice bonus for the Canucks. And then in the less time that Jake Virtanen got, I felt he played quite well as well. And I could see him. I don't think he's coming out of the lineup anymore. I think they need his speed and his physicality, especially with the unknown of what's up with Michael Furland. So I don't think he's coming out of the lineup anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, personally, because I really like Gaudette, I was a little bummed to see him come out of the lineup. But to be fair, he didn't do anything at all in game one. And I agree with what you said, Sean. The tools that Jake Virtanen possesses, whether he wants to use them or not, is very valuable to the Canucks, especially in the playoffs. And we saw it last night, man. I mean, Joel Eriksson Ek won a neutral zone battle shorthanded and had an opportunity for another the Wild's second shorthanded opportunity. He was on a breakaway where, in my opinion, the only two players that could catch him were Quinn Hughes and Jake Virtanen. Jake Virtanen, being the forward already in the neutral zone, was able to speed up and catch him. Honestly, guys, I don't think Quinn Hughes didn't have enough time to. I don't even know if he was on the ice, to be perfectly honest. But if he was, he didn't have enough time to be locked and loaded and skate, north or south all the way up north. But Jake Virtanen was there, and he's probably the only Canucks player who had been able to to catch up to Eriksson. Not to say that Eriksson's a fast player, but he had a clear breakaway. So you said it, Sean. Like, his tools were on display. He drew a penalty. I don't know how much weight there is to that, because it seemed like everyone drew a penalty last night. But I thought long and the short of it, even with limited minutes, he proved worthy out there, and I think he'll definitely come back for a game too. I don't know if Toffoli. I've heard rumblings that he's obviously unfit to play, but he may be nursing something. Personally, I think Gaudette was just taken out just to, you're a young guy, we have depth, let's try something else, and it bode well. I thought Bo Horvat really elevated his game last night too. He and Pettersson were heavily shut down in game one, and I think the Wild did a good job of shutting down Horvat and Besser actually tonight in particular, but they couldn't do anything against Elias Pettersson. Yeah, they roughed him up a little bit. Zach Parise hit him pretty hard in the third period. But guys, there was a sequence where I saw Elias Pettersson go toe-to-toe with hitting wise anyways with Ryan Suter. Like, Ryan Suter knocked him down, and Pettersson went and knocked him down. So I thought that was pretty cool. Obviously, the one thing in regards to the line shuffling and stuff like that, guys, is Michael Furling's disappearance in the second period. That really sucks to see, especially from Vancouver Canucks fans and those following this team, because we know his history with concussions, we know his history with his bad back, and coming out literally swinging in the first game was kind of bittersweet to see, because that he probably, I don't think it was the coach wanted him to go out and do that, guys. I think that was for him. He wanted to prove to himself that, this is my game, this is how I play hockey, I want to come out and do this. Whether you agree with that or not, it doesn't really matter. It was his choice. I don't think the fight had anything to do with his, leaving the game, because he did play in the first period, and he was noticeable out there. He's banging a little bit. I think for game 3 now that they don't make that many changes, barring Toffoli's, healthy enough to play.
To go back to Pettersson, I think this was also almost, in a way, his response to his physical attack was a turning point in that game last night. Is because you don't see that a lot, right? You don't, like, a lot of superstars. It's very rare that you see a guy that is considered a super, like Connor McDavid is an example. He takes a whole bunch of beating, but I've never seen Connor McDavid push back. The fact that Pettersson did, it just I don't know, Sean. For me, maybe you saw it the same, but it's
Crosby-esque, right?
Yeah, very much. That's a great point.
He recognized that there's something that needs to be changed. It's the physical game. Pettersson's probably thinking to himself, "I'm not the biggest guy, I'm not the most physical guy, but screw it. This is what you got to do to win." And if you're laying out Ryan Suter and you're taking out Hartman out of the game, man. I mean, you've really elevated your. Not to say that I want to see him get injured, anybody, but I'm just saying, if you're going to play hard, and Pettersson's been frail in the past, man, dish it out a little bit. I thought that was awesome of the guy, and no team was giving up paint around the net. Like, both teams were aggressively cross-checking, aggressively creating space, and Pettersson was all up in that as well. So I loved it. I thought it was awesome. This kid's a superstar.
Yeah.
Yeah, him stepping up and making sure that he takes care of himself and makes sure that he doesn't have to rely on them putting a lesser skilled player on his line to protect him, I think is fantastic. And it was it sucks what happened with Hartman, but to see what Pettersson was just like, no, just get out of my way, like don't do that. Like it's fantastic because he needs to play like that, because it's just going to continue not only however far they go this year, but for years to come, because he's a superstar, and players in opposing teams are going to key on him, especially because he is a little bit on the slender side comparative to like Crosby or Ovechkin or some players like that.
Absolutely. Talking about the lines, though, JT Miller really stepped up tonight. I think that was actually key in Pettersson's success, because JT Miller was a ghost in the first game, and when he did have the puck, he was bobbling it. He was checked hard on the boards, much like Besser and Horvat have been much of the series by the Minnesota Wild. He had time and space tonight, and yeah, he didn't have a ton of shots on goal. He had that beautiful bar down beauty off the Galchenyuk's giveaway, but he predominantly made space for Pettersson to work and gave the opportunity for Pettersson to get to where he had to go. even if he had to battle upon getting there. So I think that was key. If JT Miller plays his game, it elevates Pettersson's game because there's more room and more opportunity for Pettersson to have the puck on his stick versus JT Miller, who kind of just sets everything up, sets the tone, can also create space. And if leaned upon or, gets a takeaway, he can definitely put the puck in the back of the net. So I thought that for the Vancouver Canucks, there was a lot of players who obviously elevated their game and for this game too. But in regards to the Minnesota Wild, I think that their players played no worse tonight. I don't think other than that one blunder, I don't think Alex Stalock played a bad game. I don't think the defense played a bad game at all. I just think it was one of those where the Canucks simply did what they do best and scored goals.
Yeah, and with Pettersson and Miller too, underrated is just how good I felt Brock Besser played. Again, I think this is game two in a row there where Brock Besser's been fantastic, and he got rewarded by getting that goal, but he was all around the net and all up in Fiala's face and being a little more edgy, which I think we all want to see from him because he does have the size to do that. So I think that having Brock Besser on the right wing and reuniting the Lotto line, I think really helped the Canucks as well because I thought that line dominated at times and really took the game to the Wild, and that's what they need that line to do.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, I agree with you. I think Fiala early in the game was hard to be stopped. Around midpoint to towards the end, the Canucks had his number, and mostly because he was getting frustrated. And you never want to see, especially from a Wild perspective, you never want to see your guy continue to bitch and whine to the refs. And Fiala, talking about Sidney Crosby, took a page out of early Crosby's book and seemed to do that on every play. Later in the game, it seemed like he was just kind of screw it, I'm just going to go balls to the wall. And he had 6 shots on night for the Minnesota Wild. 18 minutes. One thing of note for the Minnesota Wild is the way that they dish out their minutes is pretty even. Now their fourth line did get just around 8 to 9 frame. We did see a lot of Koivu last night, which was good to see because he seems like he's actually he's playing hard. He's been taking penalties again. Great assault. Everyone's taking penalties, but he's been playing hard. But I really like the play of Fiala late. I like the play of Luke Cunnin, who had 4 shots on net. That shorty was pretty nice, and he absolutely stood up Alex Edler in the second period, towards the end of the second period too, which I thought was, for a smaller guy laying up the big Swede was something good to see. And obviously, being the Minnesota Wild, their offense is greatly generated by their back end as well, and that showed with Ryan Suter creating space with 4 hits, 2 shots on goal. Dumba had 4 shots on goal, had an assist that night. And Brodin, Jonas Brodin is probably one of the most underrated skaters and breakout playmaking defenders in the entire league. The way this guy can skate backwards, man, I think maybe only McDavid and he may even be the other Brodin, the Brodin in Calgary. They're the only other 2 skaters who I think can skate backwards as talented as this guy. And he's got a little offensive flair. He doesn't have the hands, but no, he looked good out there. He wasn't afraid to shoot the puck. And Jared Spurgeon had another outstanding night. 3 points in his first game against the Vancouver Canucks. And being an Edmonton boy, I think he's glad to be home.
Yeah, I think you're meeting Brody in Calgary.
Brody, that's what it is.
Yeah. The Wild defense. You talked about Jared Spurgeon when we did the preview of how underrated he is. I've been really impressed with him, and I've been pretty impressed overall with the play of the Wild defense so far as well. What about?
It's not pretty. It's not pretty, but it works, right?
It works,
you're watching especially for those who played hockey, you're there is no space there to come up through the blue line in the neutral zone. So it is cool to watch.
Yeah. What about the Canucks defense? What have we thought about their defense?
Myers needs to stop taking people's heads off, first of all.
And Tyler Myers needs to stop cross-checking people.
He's too tall, man. Get it through your head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, I think they played pretty very well. Last night, Tanev was still being Tanev and being a defensive force and just making smart plays and Hughes is slowly finding his legs. I think he's taking a little bit longer than Pettersson to figure out what he needs to do. I think, but a lot of it I think is the passing and for the offensive side of things is for the Canucks is very hit or miss. When they're on, they're dominating. They're able to pick apart the over aggressive Wild defensive system. But when they're not, and it's so easy for that Wild the Wild defenders to be able to get in there, cause havoc and cause the turnovers. So I think that's the biggest thing right now is for them the Canucks defense specifically to try and figure out how to fix those first passes and fix being able to get the puck out quicker and more cleanly.
I mean, you said it there, Sean. It's when the Canucks are on, their passing is so eloquent. But I think against this Wild team with the structure that they have, that's the Wild are just not letting them do that. Their system is we're going to suppress that as much as we can, both, trying to gain the zone and making a nice pass. It comes down, I think, for the Canucks, if they're struggling with that early in the night, I think it will come down to a Hughes, finding a lane or creating, using that spectacular skating to just rip through the ice and get to the offensive zone. We know the Vancouver Canucks have players who can do that. One of them being, it's Jake Virtanen. I mean, that could be a great role, just to bite through the system. He could be the X factor in the series. But back to defense. I thought Alex Edler's been playing outstanding the first and second game. One of those things where if my buddy always says this, if you don't notice a defenseman, usually that's a good thing. And for the most part, I haven't noticed any blunders of Alex Edler. Hell, it was Louis Eriksson breaking his stick on the one-timer for once, boys. Edler had an intact stick by the end of this night, so I'm just saying. But Edler's played well. Hughes, I don't think he's been playing poorly, but like you said, Sean, I just don't think he's found his other gear yet, much like Pettersson and some of the other young players on this team, Besser in particular. But again, I don't think the Vancouver Canucks defense was bad. I think in the first game, it was a lot worse. Even Myers, he had some good breakouts last night. He just has to stay out of the box. And then Tanev was another shot blocking machine last night. Overall, the Canucks had 13 blocks. And I noted, there's so many power plays, so I stopped just keeping note. On one of the later power plays in the second period, I believe that the Wild actually had a great cycle. I think I wrote down it was one of their best power plays, but the Vancouver Canucks blocked 4 shots on that one shift. So you got to credit the PK and obviously the inevitable Chris Tanev, who's been blocking a lot of shots this year and staying relatively injury free. Now, I have neither confirmed nor denied, but I know this the owner of a hockey skate guard and very new and innovative protection, very thin protection for hockey players. He confirmed nor denied that he sent a big package to Chris Tanev this last summer, but I'd have to imagine that with the amount of shot blocking he's done this year, that this postseason, that those products are working. Shout out Ask Ja out of Winnipeg. The innovative skate guard company now.
Yeah, I do know that the Canucks training staff and Tanev worked really hard to try and find something to help him with that. So
I know his brother used them in Winnipeg, so that's why the connection's there. He just didn't. The owner's I don't think I can comment on who's using them on other teams legally, but he's the Tanev really liked it, and that's so much I'll say. And then I'd see this year, he's got no broken ankles or foot or arm, and I'm okay, I think he may be a little got some extra protection, but it's pretty cool. It's a really thin. I'm not doing it justice explaining what it is, but it's a very thin, light guard that you heat up and put on the skates or on parts of your protection, and it just absorbs the blow of the puck rather than the impact, rather than it being a heavy guard. And it's been helping. I think he said more than 100 National Hockey League players now are using it, so it's cool to see.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, because it's with Tanev, I know that there's been sort of a love-hate relationship with the Canuck fan base with him, but he's a warrior. He's an absolute warrior, and he's I think one of the when I look back at 2020, that picture of him with the hair going down is going to be one of my photo memories of the year. That and Louis Eriksson swinging and missing on the breakaway. But it's just he's a guy that, like, when Paul Maurice was talking about Jansen Harkins, like, not getting a lot of opportunity, like, Chris Tanev has deserved better for the work that he has put in. And it's good to see him being healthy this year. And I think that his maturity, his confidence, and his mentorship has been a huge help to Quinn Hughes this year.
Oh, it has been, yeah. I don't. Every time you hear something about the behind the scenes aspect of the Canucks and the the locker room and all that, a lot of it is about what Tanev's been doing. Like, he has the young players, the rookies, over to his house for dinner, and has been a huge mentor that way. And then he's just a steadying force that allows Quinn Hughes to be the dynamic offensive player that he is. So I really do think that having Chris Tanev on this roster makes the Canucks significantly better, which is why this offseason is going to be so interesting with him and Troy Stecher both needing new contracts.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see with, the cap staying relatively flat due to the COVID-19 outbreak and pandemic. It's going to be interesting because it's going to be hard for the Canucks to work magic in my opinion, to lock up Chris Tanev. Because put it this way, guys, like you just said it, like he's deserved, honestly, to be paid more than he has for the type of role that he plays. He's a warrior. Yeah, he doesn't score goals, but he makes this team better. He elevates the young players, like you said. And I think it's hilarious, guys, from what I know of Chris Tanev anyways, and have talked to people who've dealt with him and worked with him. He's a pretty even keel, kind of just chill, just hockey player, hockey this, hockey that, athlete, very, very easygoing guy. Yeah, he's the one entertaining the young guys, having them over. Like, he's the last person who I would have thought would be taking the young guys under their wing, because you see veteran players do that on every team. I listened to a podcast recently where Duncan Keith was talking about how, like, Seabrook has Kirby Dach at his house, and we all know that, like, Crosby lived with Mario Lemieux for, like, his first year with the Penguins. But Chris Tanev, he's way less animated than, like, a Brent Seabrook or Mario Lemieux. So I think that's really cool. It kind of pulls the curtains back on, like, this guy probably has a fun side to him, but also is that well respected. That's worth something in the locker room, 100%. So if they can get him back on a deal, like, from a business side, 100%, but from someone who is a real fan of Chris Tanev and who I love his story, starting hockey late, going through the OPJHL of all places, and then the AHA to land a spot with the Moose. I just think his story is unbelievable, and he worked his way up the whole way, and I think that's admirable, and I think he deserves a contract. He's 30 years old. His body's banged up and bruised. Realistically, guys, he has got, 3 more years of absolutely, like, helping a team before he's not a liability, but just, like, another NHL defenseman sort of thing. He needs to cash in on those 3 years, man.
Well, I could also see him, like, if I'm a team, and I don't know Chris Tanev in any way, shape, or form, so I'm speaking from this more of a fan and an outsider in a sense, but I could see him coaching when he's done.
Oh.
He seems to have that kind of demeanor, and I think it would be a very interesting position for him. I mean, he seems like he's really smart at the game, and if he's got that kind of mentorship, I wouldn't, like, if I'm a team that, wants to take a shot at him and give him a little bit of an over contract, if I want to overpay him, which you may have to in free agency, I may toss in the opportunity to give him a look at, like, starting to develop as a coach or something like that.
Or at least give him, like, a bigger role as a defender, and maybe be like, hey, work with the defensive coach and see if, like, that's something you restart. Because I don't know, right off the bat, if, again, back to him not being a super animated guy, not that you need to be animated to be a coach, but you need that something to captivate the entire room, not just the young guys. Now, I'm sure Tanev does that. But I think especially, starting out on the defense, I think that will really actually show his smart mind, because the game of hockey, if you can master the defensive side of it, like, you're a chess master in my mind. Everything else comes a little easy after that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes into coaching at all. Honestly, I think the Canucks need to make him a big priority this offseason, and he's a team player, so I don't think that they'll have to overpay him. As long as they give him a decent enough deal with the term that he's looking for, I think they can get him at a decent cap number.
What does that look like?
It just comes down to whether or not they can fit everyone that they would need to fit in. That's it.
What does that look like? Assuming they can fit everyone like right on the cap, like right on the dollar, they're going forward with whatever it is, 73, not a penny more, penny less. What do you think he will settle on? Not necessarily what do you think he deserves, because he's a, at least in his prime, he's a $5 to $6 million defender. If he plays, let's say like 70 to 80 games, at his prime. Okay, don't throw that out of proportion, everybody. But right now, what do you think he signs for?
I think I wouldn't be surprised if they can get him at 5, and I think that's fair for what he brings.
That's why I think like that's where they'll have to settle, like 4.5, 5. It's just like you said, can they keep him under that? Can they? Yeah,
because he's making 4.45 now. Give him a bit of a raise, and give him the 2-3 year term, or like a 2-3 year term, and build on that, because they're going to need. We don't know what Alex Edler is going to look like after next season.
Yeah.
So they're going to need some veteran influence back there that you can trust to help the young players, and especially with they've got Jack Rathbone and Brogan Rafferty coming up next year in next couple of years. I think they really should be looking at finding a way to keep him, because he's that valuable, not only in the locker room but on the ice.
Okay, maybe he can help Ulevi stay injury free.
Yeah, Ulevi as well, right?
The forgotten draft pick.
Like I know everyone with the flat cap. I know everyone was hoping that the Canucks, before the flat cap, they were going to be able to improve their defense. At this point, if you can find a way to bring back both Stetcher and Tanev, and then elevate either Ulevi or even have Rafferty push for a spot, and you've got Tanev who can be there to help mentor these players, I think that's the best route to go going forwards. So I could totally see them releasing Quinn Hughes, maybe even releasing Quinn Hughes to play with, say, a Tyler Myers or even a Troy Stetcher, just to open up Chris Tanev to play with whoever wins that third left D spot. The Canucks would be really, really lucky to be able to do that if they can bring him back.
Do you need to give him the guarantee of expansion protection, or is he an automatic protection in your mind?
Good question.
That is the only issue, and I think
that's a tough one. That's a tough one, man. Because like if you're going to commit for 3 years, you want him in your system. You don't want to lose him. I'd say if they're going to sign him for 3 years, they're going to have to protect him, because why would you sign him long term if not?
They're not necessarily like have a lot of players available that are going to absolutely need to be protected on their blue line. Quinn Hughes is going to be exempt. They don't have to do anything with him. And there's going to be a free agent, so they could like work with him and say, look, this is what we want to do. We want to bring you back, but you're a free agent, so we don't necessarily want to, like, let's work the system and not protect you, but you're still coming back this way, coming back to Vancouver afterwards. So they've got some availability there. Tyler Myers doesn't need to be protected. They worked out a deal with him in his contract, so they didn't have to. There was no forced protection there. So even if they have to provide that, it's not gonna hurt them in the draft. So
it's the goaltending decision in regards to the expansion draft. It's really the Canucks are gonna have to make decisions on. And even with the forwards, I mean, we've been talking about cap and stuff like that. I mean, assuming Jake Virtanen plays well in this qualifying round, and if the Canucks go on to the playoffs, then I'm sure he'll have a better case for a decent contract. But right now, the Canucks are kind of in a pickle with him too, because arbitration is going to make sure he gets paid because of his 18 goals. But you got Travis Green scratching this guy in game one of, one of the most important games for the most important game for the Vancouver Canucks in the last, 5-6 years. Is Jake Virtanen someone that they try to trade to maybe bolster that defense and get something locked down there, which is, guys, like from Minnesota Wild perspective, I'm like Matthew Dumba Brodin is the perfect age range and perfect type of defender for the Vancouver Canucks to bring, a Minnesota Wild perspective to this. But the Canucks have nothing the Minnesota Wild need for their roster but a plethora of wingers where the Wild need a centerman. So I don't think that trade's ever going to transpire, but I do think the Canucks need a player of either Dumba's style or a Brodin style in a great skating puck moving defender or a defender with decent defensive abilities, but with an offensive flair. I think the Vancouver Canucks really have to entertain the idea of acquiring like a mid-20s, maybe not a superstar defender, but at least a top 4 guy who can move the puck with ease rather than a defensive style player like a Tyler Myers, I shouldn't say Tyler Myers because the analytics people will slap me, but like a Tanev, like an Edler.
Yeah, and that's the biggest issue is that they do need to find a way to do something. And I think I've said this. I could unfortunately foresee a situation where both local boys are not on the team next year with Virtanen and Stetcher.
You almost could.
I mean, that's a hell of a package for a decent defenseman.
Yeah, I guess if you're, I get from just to look at this from an outside point of view, what are you getting in Jake Virtanen? I mean, yes, you get 18 goals. Yes, he can skate. If you're a Canadian team, it certainly seems, and I'm going to put that in as a caveat, it certainly seems like Jake Virtanen, because I think Canadian market's a little bit different than American market, certainly seems like he's a bit of a distraction in some ways. So I don't know if I'm a Canadian team, I'm necessarily jumping up and down to pick him up. I could see maybe a team like Florida or Carolina, somewhere a bit more quiet, even maybe a Tampa Bay, a bit more quiet, maybe being more interested in a Jake Virtanen.
Yeah, I think he's less of a distraction to the room and more just like an annoyance to the team who has him. Because, it didn't seem like the guys in the room, they're just kind of like, that's Jake again being Jake. They had to make a quick statement about it. Tanev said something about the time when he was at the club a couple months ago now. But I don't think it's like hampered the room. I think Jake's just kind of like that. I don't know how to describe it. Like bro type young hockey player who just, he's still a young, I know he's been a professional for a while, but he's still a young guy who's living it up like a young athlete. And I think that there's a lot of professionals, even young, real professionals who take the game almost to another level in regards to seriousness, like Tanev, like Pettersson on that Crosby level. Like we're seeing with even the likes of Adam Gaudette, who stay after practice and work on stuff. And, they're young guys too. I think Jake's just not at that level in regards to his drive and motivation. I'm not taking anything away from the young guy. To each their own, everyone's different. The guys develop, primarily being the best. And I'm not saying he didn't have to work. You obviously have to work, but he was definitely given a lot of rope in this Vancouver Canucks organization when he probably shouldn't have, because guys, like what second year draft player goes back to junior, completely disappoints, and then gets gifted a roster spot the next year in the big show? It doesn't happen. This kid, it happened to him, and I think that was a blunder to his development, and probably could be a blunder to just how he developed off the ice in regards to listen, I keep getting rope regardless of what I do off the ice or anything like that, because I can score 18 goals, because I can skate super fast, because I can bang, and I'm consistent for a few games stretch. Maybe that has to change in regards to going to any other market, be it Canadian or a smaller American, just to be humbled and be like, no, you're not in your home city anymore. You're not the draft star we all thought you were. You're a third line player, and you're going to shut up and skate. I think he'll thrive anywhere he goes, to be honest, Canadian or not. And does thrive mean he's going to be a superstar? No, but I think he'll stay out of the tabloids and score 15 to 20 goals.
This might be a hot take. I'm going to use my hot take
Nice.
thing here. But I'm thinking about this. Is it a ridiculous comparison to compare Jake Virtanen and Zach Kassian?
No.
No. I think that's like pretty decent. I mean, obviously different storylines in regards to what they've faced off the ice, and I think Jake Virtanen can score a little bit more, like has better scoring talent. But no, that's a good comparison in regards to just a player with a lot of potential who got thrown into the fire real quick and kind of had to swim upstream, for lack of a better analogy.
Yeah, I think there's some players who just they are bigger, stronger, faster than most of their peers growing up, and they grew up. They were able to rely on that. Then they get to the NHL where everyone's that size, and they struggle to take that next step. And then because they've been bigger, stronger, faster, they've been the big shot going in up until that point. Sometimes they struggle to adapt to not being the big fish in a small pond. And I think, and especially with Jake Virtanen being a hometown boy, I think he gets a lot of attention from everyone from that aspect. And I think he just doesn't. There's a bit of a maturity issue there, and I do think that wherever he goes, he'll be successful. But if he goes to a place where he's not the big fish, and he's not the local boy who's made good, I think he might learn a little bit and be able to take that next step. And I hope he can figure it out as a Canuck, but I'm not holding my breath. But his effort last night was awesome, and the Canucks need that from him, and they need him to step up even more if Michael Furlan's not going to be able to go.
Yeah, it's funny. I look at the Minnesota Wild roster, and they have a lot of young players too who they've taken their time developing, and to see the amount of experience from players who are not only just older players on a roster, but the top players on a roster who are north of 34, 35. I think that bodes super well for the players like Fiala at 23 is very experienced. He's one of those players who's so talented he could play in the National Hockey League at a young age. But he went through the AHL system as well and grinded and learned a couple lessons there. But you got like Suter, Stahl, Parise, even Zuccarello, Spurgeon, Brodin to a certain extent as well, Brad Hunt and Koivu. Like all these guys are on this team who are helping these young guys thrive, because the young guys are in like the second and third roles. They're not expected to be those superstars. Where on the Vancouver Canucks, you do have young guys like Pettersson and Hughes who are buying in and looking up and learning from the likes of Tanev. But guys, Jake Virtanen couldn't even learn from the most professional players we've seen the last 20 years in Daniel and Henrik Sedin. So it could just be that this kid is the way he is, and that his story is still unwritten. But I think we've seen enough to know that he may not be the pros pro and superstar that we all hoped he would be, even a couple of years post of his draft.
Yeah. Speaking of superstars, I think Kevin Fiala is becoming a franchise player in this league.
He's unbelievable.
I knew he was good. I did not realize he was this, and I don't know if this is just development or I missed it, or if this is like an evolution of Kevin Fiala. But he's been something else to watch.
I think it's a little bit of both, Kevin. I think that, we saw this when he was in Nashville, especially 2017-18. He was kind of not buried, but he was protected on a third line in a depth role for the Nashville Predators. And when he had space, he did just this. He put up a respectable 23 goals, 25 assists for 48 points. And the next year was, some people say it was a down year. It was a little bit of a down year for the Nashville Predators anyways, who didn't even perform well in the postseason. But he still put up the goals, and he was able to show off that flash. I think as a younger player in Nashville, when push came to shove and he wasn't given that extra space, wasn't given those top matchups, that was kind of a learning curve for him. And we saw that last year with the Minnesota Wild. Upon joining them, he didn't look outstanding. He looked okay, but people were more stoked on Ryan Donato playing for the Minnesota Wild last year within his small point streak towards the end of the season. And this year, he had a slower start with the Minnesota Wild, coming to camp a little bit later. But as soon as it clicked about midway through the season, and when Dean Evison joined, he went on an absolute tear. It's insane. I believe he has 24 points in the last 25 games or something like that he's played, or something around there. This year, as soon as he started playing like he did in Nashville on a third line, but on a top line against top line matches this year for the Wild, I just knew that this guy was something else. The way he skates, the way that he can just butter his way through a defensive structure. His hands are squeaky clean, and his shot is something, I knew he could score goals, but I didn't know, like, when he cupped the puck and release, how just unbelievable strong it was. And we saw it twice last night where he had a little bit of time and space, and that thing went off like a cannon, man. Like, that was a hell of a shot. And nothing Markstrom can do. Like, you only can lift your shoulder up so fast. You can't block those lasers.
Sean.
Yeah, the Canucks need to the way that the Wild trying to treat Alex Pettersson is like the way the Canucks need to be treating Kevin Fiala. And they did for a little bit, and when they did, he shut down. They were able to shut him down, but as soon as they let it off the gas and gave him a little bit of space, he's got the skill to capitalize and the drive to do that as well. So very, very big key for the Canucks in Game 3 and forwards is to get right in Kevin Fiala's face. They need to find a way to do that. JT Miller, Tanner Pearson, Bo Horvat, get in his face.
You know what I heard was really interesting, actually, coming from Coach Dean Evison of the Minnesota Wild was I know the Vancouver Canucks are all about the line matchups right now because they need their top six out there against in Travis Green's mind, the most favorable matchups. They need these guys buzzing, and they need them to create space for Pettersson. Dean Evison is actually not worried about he said after Game 1 anyways, that he wasn't worried about his offensive line matchups. He's actually confident that up and down the lineup, whoever's on there for the forwards can get it done, can shut down their opponents successfully, and he's confident in them. He's more worried about the defensive matchups. So whenever Pettersson and Pettersson and Horvat's line are out there, he's either going to have Dumba and Brodin or Spurgeon and Suter. He was very vocal about that. So it's interesting that, it's interesting and ironic that the defensive-minded team is really focusing on the defenseman matchups versus the offense because we've seen that 3 to 4 lines had the ability to shut down best for Horvat or Pettersson. And in regards to Kevin Fiala, I think that Dean Evison is knows and recognizes that this is his most lethal weapon offensively. But if he's shut down by the Vancouver Canucks, there's a threat on the back end in both of those two pairings alone, and or he has 3 other lines to play with who, let's be honest, the Wild have 3 second lines and 1 third line sort of thing, right? So I think he's very confident in his players to shut Pettersson, shut that top talent down and to make up for it with the back end. Because I think, Sean, you said it earlier that the Canucks when they give up the puck either on their rush or in their neutral zone, the Wild are instantly there. That's kind of their structure. Defensive structure, pounce on the puck. We see that in a trap game too. Well, that bodes so well for defenders who can pinch, who are good at cheating and coming back, or who, let's be honest, the Wild just crowding their offense and getting the puck back to the defenders who can instantly make something happen. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. I know I've talked about depth the last time I joined you guys, but it's on display. Like, it's not just words coming from Minnesota fans and the experts out there in the state of hockey. Like, this team is so defensively sound that you can't make a mistake, and that if you shut down their top player, they got an arsenal of other depth guys who can carry the load.
Yeah, just to go back to Fiala very quickly, 9 goals before February 1st, 14 from February 1st to March 8th.
Yeah, just
so,
on a heater.
Well,
he was given a little bit more rope, too, by Dean Evison, because Boudreau played that very much possession game, which worked again. Like, their possession numbers are outstanding, and that's what won them games this year. But Dean Evison, who worked with Fiala actually in the AHL in Milwaukee when he was part of the Nashville Predators organization, both of them, he's worked with Fiala. He has a relationship with Fiala. And when he took the reins, he opened things up a little bit more. Yeah, they play the defensive structure still. I just talked about it. But the star players are given more room to work, and you can see it pay off.
Yeah. The final topic that I wanted to get into is instead of picking who wins Game 3, when you say who needs to win Game 3 more, like, who is the team that you think can come back, has a better chance of coming back from a 2-1 deficit? The Wild or the Canucks?
Man, Sean, you can go first. This one's a hard one.
I think the Canucks have a better chance. think with the top end skill, if they can get going, even if they do lose on Thursday, I think they've got the ability more to come back from 2-1 down. While I think if the Wild are 2-1 down, they could be pressing and they could end up not being able to go shot for shot with the Canucks in a game 4.
Hey, those are good points. I'll be the contrarian and say that I think the Wild actually have the edge just based on their experience. Because like we saw all last night, when the Canucks scored, the Wild weren't rattled. Penalties aside, because it's not like they took stupid penalties in response. They took penalties playing hard, which again, a lot of them I don't agree with anyways. So I think the experience factor is huge here with the Wild. They've been here before. Have they succeeded being down in like the first, second round before? Not necessarily in the last decade, but I have to imagine that the veterans are continuing to learn from that, and that with this young talent now in the lineup and being leaned upon. I mean, Eric Sinek was an absolute beast last night, guys. Kevin Fiala was great. Luke Cunnin was awesome. I mean, these are all complementary pieces where the older players now don't have to put all the pressure on their back to be like, okay, here's another series that we're behind. Here's another first round exit potentially. No, these young players are here to help them out. So I think with the new talent, some youthful legs and the experience, that going down 2-1, the Wild have the better edge in coming back. But I think Game 3 it wasn't as important as Game 2. To be perfectly honest, a lot of people are like, well, Game 2, it was kind of like a pick 'em. I think Game 2 was everything, because it actually showed that there's not one team that's better either in the short term on a heater or just in general. It really showed that these teams are 100% equal, and it's a crapshoot, which can be a little bit scary, because going into a game that is kind of a crapshoot is can't boost your confidence and ego going into a game as a professional athlete. Like, I'm sure these guys pump themselves up. Obviously, they're professionals, but it's just it adds a little bit more stress or urgency that can go both ways. Can light the fire or give you a little bit of stage fright.
It almost I almost think that the more important game. This may sound weird to say. I'll continue with the explosion because this may be a ridiculous take. Is Game 4 almost might be the most important game in the series, in that Game 4 and Game 5 is back-to-back. And if you're up 2-1,
right,
and if, just imagine for a moment, this goes to overtime, and the other team scores that overtime goal to force a Game 5, that team will have the momentum going into Game 5 in a back-to-back situation.
Well, sir, no, I believe it's 3 and 4 that are back-to-back. It's Thursday, Friday.
Is it? Oh, sorry, you're right. 3-4. Okay.
Hey, well, regardless, Game 4 is still important because you're coming off a back-to-back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing, guys, I want to throw to you. The Canucks and Wild have been playing. Their first 2 games have been late games with let's be honest, with subpar professional ice. Because I don't care how good your crew is on that ice. You play 3 games in August in any rink. The third time you play a game, it's hard to make that ice as good as it was in Game 1 and Game 2. Players were falling down left, right, and center, and both the Wild and Canucks had problems early on, especially with bobbling the puck and whatnot. Do you think that we see just a change of game and maybe even less penalties and less just flopping around out there in regards to skating? Because guys are falling down left, right, and center with the early start on Thursday.
I don't think we're going to.
So, and I think you'll see teams be whichever team can get the sharpness in their passing game on as quickly as possible and gets it done first will have a huge edge.
Wes Walls was saying it. Wes Walls was saying on the Fox Sports North broadcast, saying that and Wes Wall is obviously the Canucks killer of 2003, was saying that this is a huge deal that people don't necessarily think about. You go to any even tournament with your local rink, not even NHL rink, and you see at the end of a tournament, 3 or 4 games played, doesn't matter how many times you Zamboni that bad boy, it is moist. So I have to imagine that it is playing a part, even a little part in this series. And I'm just excited to see how these teams react in breakout more than anything with better ice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Travis Green was talking about how the ice certainly has changed in the last half of each period. That's been an adjustment.
Okay.
He talked about that last night. I don't think the penalty thing is going to change, but I do think that the crispness, it will look a little bit more crisp, which may end up less penalties. I don't know, but I still don't know I still think the refs are going to ref the games as inconsistently as they've been reffing them so far. So,
okay, one last question because I know we're running out of time here, but I'm all fired up now. Do you think that that in the playoffs, not the qualifying, on the playoffs, the refs put their whistles back on the shelf and let the guys play?
Man, it depends on the game. Like I've seen it both ways. Like it's crazy. There's no standard or idea on what you're going to get. You don't know until like halfway through the first, and that could change in the second too. I think we're seeing more let them play as much as possible, but they just seem to start the games with a lot of ticky-tack calls and weird calls where you're like, they were bad. Like, why did you give a penalty to someone who, like, I don't makes no sense. So I don't know. I think it's I do think that it'll become a little more consistent on let them play though.
I have to look a little bit more how the round robins have been officiated. I don't think we've been talking enough about what that round robin means. I think I was mentioning that to Devin yesterday during the recap in the Leafs game. I don't know if there's some interesting strategy around that. So I don't know. This is one thing I do disagree with Tyler, who's our official on our podcast. Is I think it might work a little bit better if at least the referees are, if they're not for a series, they're at least there for 2 games instead of 1. Because I think that's part of the problem. You get one crew that comes in and they call a game one way, and then you kind of have that mindset that you think that the game is going to be played a certain way or going to be called a certain way. Then you get game 2 and it's called completely different. I do think that there needs to be at least 2 games in a row that you get the same officiating. I mean, it's going to be tough to have the argument that it's an entire series, but I think that there needs to be, like, switching from one ref group to another, I think is clearly part of the problem from what I'm seeing here. I don't know if
I can get on board with that. I've said that, even dating back to past years of playoffs. I think you have to have like at least at minimum 2 groups for one series, or maximum, 2 groups per series. Like you can't bring in like 3 different ref groups and expect the game to be called a certain way, whether mandated away or not by the National Hockey League. But again, I'm gonna die on the sword that I don't think the players didn't do anything wrong in this last sense where they were even taking advantage of even the thought of, okay, I have a little bit more room. I'm going to get my stick a little bit more deep in there. I just think the Canucks and the Wild just played respectively hard in game 2 last night. And there was a few penalties, like sticks getting caught in the skate. So like I said earlier, Parise stepping inside and stepping on the skate blade of the defender Stetcher. Like those things are going to get called. But just some of the, like you said, ticky-tacky stuff, it's like the players aren't, are not taking that extra step and playing a little bit more dirty or hard in that sense or irrespectable. It's just that they're getting called for stuff that you think, and even in the regular season, that is just hard hockey. So it's going to be interesting because I don't think the players are letting it bother them yet, but they haven't really tested the waters, so to speak, either, because they haven't even had a chance to.
Yeah.
There are 11 refs in each hub. So you have the ability to try and match things up per series if they want. But at this point, because the Canucks had the pair of Kelly Sutherland and TJ Luxmore in Game 1 versus the Wild, and then last night it was Chris Rooney and I believe John McIsaac.
Okay.
Just looking at who's available. So like, and then the Flames had the Flames and Jets had the Sutherland Luxmore pair yesterday, and I thought again they struggled in terms of consistency more than others.
Yeah, and
so I don't know.
And Sutherland's an experienced guy, if I'm not mistaken. I'm surprised, but I think honestly, guys, the refs are probably rusty too. I mean, shit, they're not professional athletes during quarantine. I mean, some of the guys look like they cooked and baked a lot of bread, I guess, over the break. A couple of them look a little bit more pudgy, but hey, You're not skating every night. That makes sense. I'm not blaming them yet because I think it's an NHL. I'm gonna say still that it's an NHL thing versus just a ref thing, but it definitely could be a possibility that these refs are still just getting back into game shape themselves.
Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. And maybe one of the things that I think was maybe a smaller, like the NHL has been a master at this, but of how they've handled this bubble, like mostly perfect. A couple of tweaks, and the one tweak I do think we should have had 2 exhibition games, not 1. I think that was probably a minor mistake.
Yeah, I'm torn on that one just because it's like I think for getting the guys into game shape and the refs, of course, and to get to set the tone of how it's going to be called. 100%, I'll agree with you there. Yeah. But the risk of injury for me, too much, way too much.
Yeah, no, I get it, but you probably could have done even a 3-on-3 or just something fun. But I think it just get people into game shape. The other thing I think that the Hockey Night in Canada and the Sportsnet crew, I've called for this for a while, but I think they need to get an official analyst on the on their
oh yeah,
I think that would really help a lot because it's a lot of it is just dumb fans like me. It was like, I don't understand why this is a penalty and why this is not, but if someone can break it down a little bit more to explain that a little bit more, that would help a lot. Or let Ron McLean do that a little bit more.
No, don't let Ron McLean talk more. You're taking away time from Brian Burke and Kevin Bieksa. That's a crime.
I hear you. But
Bieksa's been killing it, by the way. His haircut sucks, but he's been killing it. I think he's been doing great on the panel there. I am disappointed that Sportsnet made Berkey tie up his tie. That was like, oh, come on, man. You went how many years as a lawyer and an agent and working in the front office? You never tied your tie, and as soon as Sportsnet comes calling and pays you the big bucks, now you got to dress up for them. Oh.
Well, at least they didn't make Elliot Friedman shave his beard.
Yeah. Well, they just knew they were going to get viewers just for that. So.
Yeah.
Well, Sean's giving him a run for his money there. Hopefully, if the Canucks go for, we'll put it this way, guys, I got to grow a beard out either way because if I'm covering the Wild, if they move on, I got to support the playoff beard for these live streams. And if the Canucks go on, you better believe I'm supporting them. So I'm half Persian. Within 2 weeks, it's going to be catching up to you, Sean.
Well, we'll see for sure.
We'll do the beard recap.
I haven't had the baby face in like close to 5 years. So
I love it.
All right. Anything else we need to talk about?
No, I think we covered pretty much all the angles. I mean, actually, one last question for you guys, because I'm pretty confident that the Wild are sticking with Stalock. But do you think that they maybe switch it up to just for the sake of throwing Vancouver off a little bit, because Stalock plays that aggressive style game and makes it very easy to transition the puck. And makes it hard for the Canucks to score off the rush. But Devin Dubnyk's a completely different can of worms, and Kaapo Kähkönen, hell, we don't even know what he could bring to the extent yet because we haven't seen the sample size yet. So do you think that maybe the Wild, they try to throw the Vancouver Canucks off a bit and change up the goaltending, assuming they're confident, all three of the guys?
I don't think so in Game 3. I think that it's a potential for Game 4 on the back-to-back, though.
Yeah, I could see it. I could see depending on. I think Stalock's Game 3, but Game 4. That's more up for.
If they have another game like last night where they're giving up 4 or 5 goals, I could definitely see them switching it up for Game 4.
Yeah, I think if there's another early goal that's just like one-on-one Stalock, I hate saying should have had it because I'm not a goalie, I'm not facing NHL shots, but. If you're paid at an elite level and you're on the biggest stage, I'm just gonna say you have to make those saves. If he makes another blunder like on the shot from Pearson, then I think that kind of tips the favor into a different goaltender. But to be honest, guys, the other goals for the Canucks, like deserving goals, good goals, but they weren't pretty necessarily. They're off rebounds where they're rushing the paint, and I think actually one of the better ones was I thought it was a pad save rebound to Besser when he got his goal, but it was actually Pettersson in front of him with the redirect. Now, whether it was intentional or not, if it was intentional, then holy crap, this kid's something else, as we all know. But regardless, that was just kind of, and if it wasn't intentional, it was a lucky bounce. So I think the Canucks did everything right to get in position to score, but I don't think Stalock necessarily did anything wrong other than giving up that first one. He did everything right. So that's why I just wanted to get your guys' opinion, because I think they're going to stick with him for Game 3. I don't know, depending on how he plays in Game 3, what they're going to do for Game 4. I personally just want to see that Finn play for the Wild, but I know they're not going to disrespect Dubnyk and put him over him.
To me, the only goaltender that has stood on his head so far has been Carey Price. I think everybody else, every other goaltender has been okay or inconsistent.
You don't like James Reimer?
Well, he made a couple
I'd say Korpisalo deserves a lot of credit too.
Yeah, he's
well. Him too. He's been the goaltending in the Columbus Toronto series has been strong, but like for the most part, it's been a bit inconsistent. Like,
and I think that's what you were. I think everyone should have been expecting. Only one exhibition game before all this started, so yeah. I think we're seeing a lot of goalies still trying to find their game. Like Markstrom is a good example. He's not at the top of his game, but he's not at panic level, and he's finding ways to make the saves, and which is good. He's battling, and
he's looked great. I think I've had no issues with Markstrom. I haven't been critical with him at all. I think he got a little too cocky at the end of the game last night as the Wild, pushed late and inevitably scored. And even with like the final millisecond where I forget who someone just slapped it from center ice, and it kind of bounced. Now I know the Wild were clearly offside in that play, but still, it's just like, man, like the game's still on. Chill out. But I just want to quickly say, first, postseason win for Markstrom last night. Congratulations. First assist by Quinn Hughes and first goal by our boy Brock Besser, both from the state of hockey and as a Canucks fan here. So it was a positive night for the Vancouver Canucks. And as you guys know, I bleed blue and green for the Vancouver Canucks, but I cover the Wild. So this series is just, it's weird watching it because I don't get, I cheer for the Canucks when they score, but I also twitch and like when the Wild score, I'm like, oh yeah, wait, what am I doing here? So it's interesting while watching the game, but overall it's a win-win for me, and it's been a blast catching up with you guys, and it's been a blast covering the series thus far.
Thanks. Yes. Well, thank you, Isha, for coming on as we are getting our game legs on. So how do we follow you, Isha?
You can follow myself on Twitter at VI Sports Talk, and you can follow the network that I run and manage at HockeyPodNet. The Hockey Podcast Network is your boutique hockey podcast destination. We have one podcast covering every team in the National Hockey League, and we have podcasts covering every niche in hockey. You like lifestyle, you like fights, you like listening to Terry Ryan, the best goddamn storyteller in all of hockey. We have that for you on the Hockey Podcast Network, including the Sota Pod, which I host and cover the Minnesota Wild.
Fair enough. Well, we cover a bunch of teams. We're all things to all people, maybe. I don't know.
I love it. Well, you are the Hockey Podcast. So.
We are the Hockey Podcast. Yes. Sean, how do we follow you?
I am Bearded Canucks 03 on Twitter.
And I am KVOLE. Heidi's Heidi Mazeballs. Devin Gordhow 09. And Schneider. Chris is Schneid's SCHNEIDZ. He's still around. He's working, so it's tough for him with the schedule, but we'll hopefully get him on soon. Tyler's T Noble, and we will talk to you all very soon. Bye.
So much for the sweep, Faber.
Yeah, that's true, Faber. So much for the sweep.